The first thing that Griffith will tell you if you speak to him is that I am Welsh, he will say, which is rather like a 10-foot man telling you he's tall.
Although I haven't known him very long, I mean 8 years or so, 9 years. I would not, and it was an impression that I gained from the very beginning, I would not buy a second-hand car from Kenneth Griffith.
I swore he once said to me, when I was dishonourably discharged from the Royal Air Force, my psychiatrist committed suicide.
Sure, I poisoned a lot of people, but I think a lot of villains. Or I poisoned a lot of villainous attitudes. To be called the Tenby Poisoner, I hope it will be clear in the end who and what I am poisoning.
He's very worried about this whole business of civilization. He's not quite sure if it's working. He can understand intellectually that the idea of urban communities and societies and philosophy and empires, but he's not quite sure if it's working. Therefore, he's taken upon himself this role of looking for what is noble, what is fine, what is heroic, what is splendid, and contrasting it against what is petty, what is evil, what is minuscule, what is unnecessary. He's determined to castigate and to praise.
Ken Griffith is one of the most remarkable filmmakers of our time because he combines in himself so many abilities that make for good filmmaking. He's a marvellous actor, he's a skilled director, he has a great flair in the choice of subjects that resonate and matter to him. And perhaps more importantly than anything else, he has that very valuable quality in a documentary maker. He's wholly committed to a point of view on some great issue that is bound to stimulate and annoy. And so his films are always an event.
If there were any justice in the universe, which of course there isn't, he ought to be 6'3", dazzlingly handsome, able to lift 500-pound snatch, and overcome everybody, because that's what he's like as a filmmaker. Yeah. He overcomes all obstacles.
Your parents left you very early on, when you were very young. They left you with your paternal grandparents. Have you forgiven your parents?
I should say that, of course, they're leaving, you see. My parents leaving when I was 6 months old. I don't remember my mother and father when I was a small child. Was an enormous piece of good fortune for me, because my grandparents were such splendid, beautiful people. And I don't wish to reflect on my grandmother in any way, but my grandfather, whatever I may be, for better or for worse, it's my grandfather in me. He was a sort of hard-working saint.
Tenby County School, the first revelation that you wanted to be an actor. How did that come about?
Well, you know, it was said at the time when I was at the Tenby Council School. It was my classmaster, Mr. Ensor Morgan, who actually spoke the words in front of me and many others. When he saw that I was going to the Tenby Green Hill Grammar School, he shouted, "It's a clerical error! Impossible!" Nobody disagreed. How could I possibly pass an examination? But I did. They had to find me out there. I had to leave when I was in the fourth form at the age of 15 and a bit. Combination of poverty and academic disaster. Academic disaster in terms of not being able to pass examinations. If I was interested in something, probably I was a bit better than anybody else, but you don't pass examinations that way. And I was blessed with an English, and an English literature mistress, Evelyn Ward, who is still my dear friend.
Oh, I think he wasn't very interested in being educated, you know. He loved English, he liked writing, he loved acting, and a delightful response to literature. We did real literature in those days. We didn't talk down to kids. We always did Shakespeare. You know, we were doing Midsummer Night's Dream when they were 11, always. And it's a gift to a teacher to have the natural reader and the natural actor to whom you can give the part, you know. I had some very moving performances out of lots of boys and girls, but not such a natural as Kenneth. And I didn't shape him, you see. He shaped it himself. Usually I was at work, you know, ordering it and shaping it, but I left him to do it.
You were brought up on the utterances of the professional men of God. What was their effect?
Well, I knew nothing else within my family. They talk about going to chapel twice a Sunday. I went 3 times. I was wedged there between my grandmother and grandfather in the morning. I went to Sunday school in the afternoon, and I was wedged between them in the evening. What they didn't know was that I suffered from claustrophobia. I didn't know what it was, but I would get a bit panicky. As for the preachers, in retrospect, I now know that their performances were astounding. In those days, let's say once a month, someone comparable to Edmund Kean would clamber up in that pulpit, and as actors would do the most outrageous, unbelievable things. I mean, they would thunder potential retribution at us, but then they would turn their back on us, and no one dared breathe. They had their backs to us. Well, the one I'm thinking of in particular, just his back, and it went on, and suddenly back at us. Oh, shit!
Well, he quite staggered, stayed old Tenby. By this time, everybody, you know, knew our work, and all the townspeople, not just parents, would come flocking to see a play. And they were quite staggered with his work.
And what a relief it was to escape from my poor self to become Hamlet or Iago or what have you. And the idea, I'd never seen an actor. I'd been to the cinema, but I'd never been inside a theatre or seen an actor. But the idea, this was the door through which perhaps could I escape into a creative world. And the first theatre I saw, I was given a job in Cambridge in an ironmonger's shop counting nails. And I knew there was a theatre there, and I went into the very first theatre I'd ever been in, where they were performing The Merchant of Venice. And I thought it was wonderful. I suspect it was wonderful. And the next day I left the nails, went to the stage door, asked for the producer. I was just under 16, spotty-faced Welsh boy. And the producer, whose name was Peter Hall, not Peter Hall. If it had been Peter Hall, I don't think he would have come up. But Peter Hall did. And he said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to be an actor." And I pulled out the notices from the Tenby Observer and County News, which said I was remarkable. He read them. He said, "Can you do something for me now on the stage?" I said, "Yes, sir." I did a bit of Richard of Bordeaux. I did a bit of Henry V. And when that was over, he said, "All right, you've got a job here as an actor, £3 a week. You could have full board for 25 bob a week."
You came to London as a young actor and fell under the spell and the influence of 2 great theatrical giants, Tyrone Guthrie and Emlyn Williams.
Emlyn Williams helped me a bit when I was quite young. I once said to him, "Thank you for your help." He said, I've done nothing for you." And I didn't reply, but I thought, you may not have done much, but you did more than anybody else. Later, of course, Tyrone Guthrie, the greatest theatre man of my time, I became his protégé. Because Guthrie employed me as a classical actor, I have played Hamlet for the BBC, I played Iago, I played Shylock, I played Oberon. That's about all I have played in Shakespeare, but they were decent parts.
You'll be sorry for this, Archie.
My place was in the shop, licking the boots of your classy customers. But you weren't so high class as a murderer, Mr. Heiss. They got you for that once, didn't they? And they'll get you again unless you're very, very careful.
What do you want from me?
I haven't quite made up my mind.
I played the most monstrous villains in films, the first one being the shop at Sly Corner. I mean, literally, I've got into a railway compartment, and I don't exaggerate, and it was such a famous image at the time of evil personified that people have got out of the compartment and wouldn't sit with me. But then I got trapped in those villains, and they declined in quality of writing, and it was Roy Boulting who rescued me.
It's one of the most appalling things about films and casting and directors that they usually pick actors who have done something that they then want to repeat. It's boring for the actor, it's boring for the film goer after a certain time. But I think that he did suffer from that. But I tell you that you can give him a range of roles to play, and he's a bloody good actor.
Morning, Euan.
Morning, John.
Morning.
How's the family?
Fine, boy.
Oh, Megan's not up to much.
Oh?
Sick as a dog she was this morning. Could hardly raise her lovely head from the pillow. Oh, do the muss. Can I be of any assistance, John?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. No, I was saying about Megan, you know. Well, the reason she gets these bad spells is because she's worried about my chances.
Chances of what?
Well, of getting the job, of course. Vacancy for sub-librarian.
Oh, yes, yes.
From a child, when I saw him first in films, I always admired this strange, beautiful man. Then I was delighted to see that he had also the courage and the ability to play comedy. I'd never expected that. I'd always seen Kenneth as a serious, rather twisted and bitter things he played, but to suddenly see him playing the most difficult things that we actors have to do, which is comedy, and bringing it off superbly with such élan, that delighted me.
I first met Kenny in the unlikely presence of Saunders Lewis, who gazed at Kenny in awe all evening. About 6 months later, I had the good luck to have him in a play of mine, which was put on in Teddington by Armchair Theatre. Well, it started off with tremendous bonhomie, good play, everybody said, and we went off very well, but it was too long. And every day we'd look at it, and bits of the play would be cut for time. And unfortunately, they all happened to be Clifford Evans's part, which was the biggest. And Kenny's part remained the same, so Cliff got more and more annoyed, and one day he exploded in the rehearsal room, and he protested to Charlie Jarrett, the director. He said, "The little Tenby get is staying. He's got him staying with him," he said, meaning that Kenny and I sat up every night cutting bits of Clifford Evans's part. Well, the atmosphere was a bit tense, and I christened Ken the Tenby Poisoner-The then, first of all. But, needless to say, Ken and Cliff were tremendous in the part, and when you got Kenneth Griffith as a performer, you got 20 shillings in the pound.
Since I had aspirations to be a film producer, and I had to go through the various stages to reach that dream, I always logged it in the computer back here that if I were able to cast him in the right part, I would be strengthening a friendship, but at the same time doing myself a big favor. And that opportunity came later on, when Reginald Rose, a very distinguished American screenwriter, produced an interesting group of characters for a film called The Wild Geese.
Whitty, Arthur, sir, age 43, medical orderly.
You don't have to go over your qualifications. How are you, Whitty?
Fine, sir.
Look fit?
Thank you, sir. I put a lot into cranking up hospital beds, patients flying around the wards, that sort of thing. Keeps me in shape, sir.
Why do you want to fight with us again?
Colonel Faulkner, 2 years of sorting gallstones at St. Vincent's Hospital is hardening my heart and softening the more important parts. I want to reverse the process.
It could be a bloody one.
Aren't they all? I like to keep busy, sir.
All right, you got the job.
Thank you, sir. Do I have time to get a divorce?
36 hours.
Oh, lovely, sir. I can't wait to see his face.
When I debuted as actor/director last year on an episode of Lovejoy, my particular script, the lead character was described as mercurial, funny, quirky, strange, sexy. I wanted Kenneth Griffith.
Thank you.
And my finder's fee?
If you think I'm paying you, you're crazy. You destroyed my property.
And made you a very rich man in the process.
Oh, marvelous. I suppose if you burgled my house, which I consider quite possible, you'd ask for the insurance money.
The agreement was 2% commission on the sale price.
Ah, on the peg. Ah, as it happens, there it is. Take 100%.
Now comes a different phase in your career, Ken, and the door is opened once again for you, and opened by Llewellyn, who gave you the opportunity to indulge your enthusiasms.
Yes.
He gave the preacher his biggest pulpit yet. Now, was that a frightening possibility?
No. You know, he thought well of me as an actor. Then he got to know my views. Of course he did. We were friends. So it was at that point he said, Kenneth, would you make a film for us, meaning the BBC, on your enthusiasm? That's what he said. And I think he thought my enthusiasm was an interest in the British Empire, a somewhat critical interest in imperialism. And I said no, 3 times, significantly 3 times. I said, no. I said, look, I'm an actor, I'm not a filmmaker. I said, I'm not a writer. And he asked me again. He brought in young David Attenborough, who was then running BBC Two, and the both attended on this hope. And I said no. And the 3rd time they said, look, we'll pay you to try. Think about that. You can go anywhere you want to in the world, do what you like. We won't interfere. You can do what you like. I thought they're mad.
Here the Lancashire men died, and those who returned to Liverpool watched the game, the football game, from a large mound of earth, as it was at the time, and they called it, remembering their mates up here who were dead, the Kop, Spion Kop. Now, if anyone has the audacity to argue with me about the politics of what I have said, I call to my support another Welshman, Mr. David Lloyd George, who said precisely this while the war was being created by the British and while it was being fought, and thereby earned himself persecution from a large proportion of the British people.
I think the point about Ken is that there's nobody else at all like him. He is quite literally a unique figure. Nobody else has even tried to do what he's tried to do, which is to make documentary programs beginning from the fact that he's an actor. Most documentary program makers start from the fact that they're filmmakers.
Edmund Kean wrote a letter to a friend. And then his grief broke. Mary believed that he had gone completely mad. He rushed from their lodgings and consumed bottles of brandy. He came raging back, swearing that he had the power to bring his little boy back to life. The Zulus threw their rifles away and, gripping their stabbing assegais, began to shout their triumphant battle cry, Usutu! Usutu! All around them were Zulu warriors. Lieutenant Coghill was heard to shout, "Here they come!" Melville replied, "I'm done. I can't go any further." But they managed to scramble halfway up this cleft, and here they both died. Empires are essentially about material profit and exploitation. Anyway, Omichand was at Murshidabad, here at the Nawab's court. And Clive and company knew that if Omichand sensed that he was not going to get his money, he might betray the conspiracy between the British and General Mir Jafar. And so the British devised a dirty trick to deceive Omichand. One day, here in America, these two great and good men exchanged memorable and significant words. Benjamin Franklin said, "Tom, where liberty is, there is my country." Thomas Paine must have looked very carefully at his old friend before he replied truthfully, "Where liberty is not, there is mine." Now that sentiment of Tom's is always the sentiment of an inspired group of human beings who are everlastingly vital to our good earthly hope. It is the sentiment of Jesus Christ to the Mahatma Gandhi of Martin Luther King, and that sentiment seems to lead inevitably towards martyrdom. And Tom Paine was to be no exception.
He's a freedom fighter. He sees victims and tells people, look, this is a race of people and you've forgotten about them. And you mustn't forget about them because they have their traditions and their beliefs and their religions are sometimes much more ancient than yours is.
I mean, he's a deeply rooted radical man. And he has this capacity to slip into not only the skin of people, but into the consciousness of nations almost. He can take upon himself the causes of Israel and present a very coherent argument which even embarrasses the Israelis. It's so extreme.
Ben-Gurion replied to the British, "The Jewish people have no army, navy, or air force. But if you try and force minority status on us in our own national home, you will have to keep a much larger army in Palestine than you have now. And even then, you won't succeed."
Ken Griffith has been endowed with some unusual qualities. The first, I believe, the most important one, is that he sees the world with his own eyes. I mean, apparently every one of us sees the world with his own eyes, but it isn't that true. I mean, he sees it with his own eyes. He doesn't see it through other people's eyes. He makes up his own judgment and is very, very true to himself. The second thing about this man is that the man is an extremely curious person. He wants to know. He wants to understand. He wants to go into the matters deeply. And the third, certainly not the last thing, is the man has an unusual human compassion. The man has human warmth, which is rarely found among people in general and amongst people in his profession.
What is unique, of course, in terms of television is that you are saying something. You're stating a point of view. You don't tread the conventional documentary paths of balance and fairness. Could you, if you were required to?
Well, I once tried to. You know, it had been written very often that my films were not objective, which led me to write a letter to poor, long-suffering Hugh Weldon. I wrote it to him. I used to badger him. If you love someone very much, you nag them. I used to do the same to Tyrone Guthrie. And I wrote to Hugh, would you please make it public within the BBC that I hope that I will never, ever stoop so low in my life as to be objective about anything. I wrote, I remember the letter distinctly, I wrote, objectivity is the business of computers. I am not a computer. If you were to ask me to make a film on the life of Pastor Niemöller, the brave Protestant who stood up to Adolf Hitler, and I wrote in parentheses, incidentally, a jolly good idea, if at the end of it you expect me to say, on the other hand, Himmler had his point of view, and he did, it's not on. You must ask a good Nazi to do that.
He is a maverick, he is opinionated, and for those things I envy him. I mean, it's a luxury that he has. He's been seen as an historian, rightly or wrongly. I see him as a great reporter. I see him as the other type of reporter, the non-straight-jacketed reporter. We live in the straight-jacket of news. There's no bias, supposedly, in our reports. We can't offer an opinion. We can't do a nod and a wink and a, I wish I could tell you a bit more about this. He can do all those things and make people sit on the edge of their chairs, and we find it increasingly harder to make people do that. The other great thing, one of the things that I find so attractive about him as a reporter, is that he's sinister, and we are bland. And that's why fewer and fewer people watch us, I think, on television. We are bland robots. We look like bank clerks, and we report with a kind of speak-your-weight voice. The great thing about him is he's totally different, idiosyncratic, outrageous, fantastic, makes people sit up and listen.
He had a constant sort of run-in with authority because of the outspoken views that his films put across. And he suffered quite badly. Particularly in the suppression of a quite marvellous film about Michael Collins, one of the architects of the independence of the Irish Free State, which Ken made, Hang Out Your Brightest Colours, and that film was never shown.
During his own father's lifetime, well over 1 million Irish people died of starvation under English patronage. And he could see for himself what was happening during his old childhood, the greedy, continuing exploitation of the land by most of the English landlords. And he could see that the options open to many of his native Irish people were still to go to hell or to go to the rocks of Connaught, or to the United States of America. Oh yes, he was a very angry Irish lad.
If anything could have made clear the bitter differences between England and Ireland, this film could have certainly helped. It could have assuaged a great deal. At the same time, such as a conservative view of things, I felt hello, hello, hello. So halfway through the first showing of it, I said, where's the negative? And he said, it's out at Pinewood, having its colour matched. I said, you go into a taxi and get the negative, and I'll keep them talking. But of course he wouldn't listen, and as you know, the negative is gone and never will be seen. Well, that kind of censorship, it's not censorship, it's crushing with a heel. It's misguided and fundamentally savage.
In a way, he's not concerned with something as minor as the history. He's much more concerned with this hugely powerful business of what was it like to be that man at that time. Now, from Griffith's point of view, there is nothing, that is what you should be doing. But it is, of course, deeply subversive, because what you then find yourself faced with if you're a television management person is this enormously powerful expression of what is against the authority at the time, or the establishment view.
He
puts across a point of view that it doesn't matter whether you agree with it or not, but it deserves to be put. And the reason those films should be shown is that they would illuminate to Britons the history of British involvement with Ireland in a way that it never is, in current affairs programmes, in drama programmes, in historical programmes. And for heaven's sake, with Curious Journey, there was a book published under Kenneth's name which included these interviews with these historic figures, most of them now deceased, who were involved in the 1921-22 events. Why can't this be put out on television? What is the difference between publishing it as a book, publishing it as a television programme? You may not agree with Kenneth's conclusions, but I would defend to the death his right to put them.
Having encouraged us all to drop our trousers, the administrators of the country were now busy picking our pockets, and among the things that they were taking away was this freedom to say something on a political issue. Now, to my knowledge, it was never shown, the Michael Collins film. And I remember he said to me, well, I showed it to the Labour who were in opposition then. And he said, oh, well, when we come in, we'll show it. And of course, they never did.
I had to go to Downing Street. Wilson was Prime Minister. I had to see two Northern Ireland secretaries, that's Lord Deeds and Merlin Rees. And all of them, it was said, no, there is not one word in it that is inaccurate. But under no circumstances must it be shown to the British people. Lord Deeds said, and I've got it on film,
if you are going to sow into the minds of the soldiers doubts as to whether they should be there at all, apart from what they may be doing, then you have committed, I'm afraid, an offence, not just a sin, but you have committed an offence in our annals. And that is, again, I'm sorry, something politicians have got to uphold. You said it, and this is treasonable, and it is, because you must not subvert soldiers from their duty by saying to them, you're wasting your time, this is a complete nonsense, you're against a background of dishonesty, of perfidy, of bad treatment of Ireland, and you might as well come out. Now, if you do that, even as a faithful artist, presenting the thing as honestly as you know how, you have committed an offence.
He was very honest and was prepared to look at the position of people who were basically underprivileged, people who were censored, people who didn't have a voice. It's very important for people to have full information in order to make up their minds about the rights and wrongs of the situation. I think it makes it much easier to find a solution if everybody is aware of the problem. I find it quite surprising and shocking that someone like Kenneth Griffith could in turn then be censored himself by the British government for telling the truth. Oh, I have faith in the justice and fair play of ordinary British people. Most definitely I do have. And that is even boosted by meeting people like Kenneth Griffith and others who are prepared to challenge the stereotypes which are portrayed of people like myself and of the struggle for freedom in Ireland.
It seems to me that if anyone in Ireland needs the kind of Kenneth Griffith championship of their cause, it is the Protestants.
They won't get it from me. No, how ungracious can you be when knowing very well who put you there, the English, why they put you there to destroy the inhabitants, and refuse and will kill to prevent a democratic decision being made in Westminster that has been made again and again for Home Rule for the whole of Ireland. You know, the hero of my current film, Roger Casement, was a Protestant. His first great hope was to get the Protestants to support a united, free Ireland, all of it.
Casement was talking about the chasm that lies between the Celt and the Anglo-Saxon. Dangerous reality, as I myself know to my cost, and particularly dangerous, of course, for a servant of the British Crown. Casement then added, the sufferings of the Congo is very near my heart, but the Irish question is nearer. What had he said about the Irish Catholic people as against the Protestant people of the northeast of Ireland, often hunted themselves? No words of mine can communicate the cataclysmic persecution that Britain has inflicted on Ireland over the past 800 years.
I like to think that two elements had a great influence on the English, who are Germans, Angles and Saxons. The English have got to accept the fact, proudly, that they're Germans. But I think the Roman, you know, I sometimes see Englishmen in St. James's. You don't see them so much now because they're mainly dead. But there'd be tall, conservatively clothed Englishmen, rolled umbrella, and I've seen them. This is not with bowler hats tipped at a certain angle. They've certainly done some service in the Guards, talking discreetly on a corner. And I thought, that's where the Romans ended up.
Kenneth Griffith and marriage. It's not a success story.
This is a very difficult one. I've been absolutely ruthless. And I've caused deep and terrible distress. I live with it. Not only to ex-wives in varying degrees, 3 ex-wives, but also to my children, which is even more terrible. But it was a compulsion. All I had was this ability to communicate. And it was such a bitter fight to survive as an actor, and even with these films, that I knew that if in any way that struggle was added to, I would break. I'd be finished. And I felt that I'd become a little grey man, disappear, and be useless to everyone around me.
Oh, he's had 3 wives, has he? I never knew. Yes, I never knew how many he had. I was so used to Kenneth in the course of our long friendship, saying to me in those particularly Kenneth tones, "Roy, I think you have met my wife." And invariably, of course, I used to say yes. And I would turn and find somebody who I'd never, ever met before. I think that I'm interested to learn that it's only 3. It all seemed to be rather more to me. Perhaps some were just mistresses, not married in the sight of God, but in the sight of the bedchamber. Ah, yes.
If it's a prerequisite for being a good parent that you're there for much of the time, then I suppose it's only fair to say that Dad doesn't score terribly well. I have only one very slight memory of him living at home. He left when I was about 4. On the other hand, if you can give points for the influence that he's had on your life, then I mean, he'd get a definite 12 out of 10 from me. He's influenced me in both my careers and a great deal in my standards, judgments and morals.
I have noticed over the years, as faces have changed, as children have appeared, that whenever there's either a family celebration or an occasion, I will see these faces that I do recognize returning from different parts of the globe to either take care of him, to cosset him, to feed him, to look after him. So there must be something in the relationship that brings them in search, once again, of Kenneth Griffith, the lover.
My father's always been a ladies' man, and I think this was painful. And also, having said he's a ladies' man, I believe he stated it publicly, he's self-confessed misogynist. And So this contradiction between a man who loves women and one that doesn't get on with them so well may be explained by his relationship or non-relationship with his own mother.
It's a recent development. He was a great, I can remember time after time after time, I would say, he would come to me and say, O'Toole. No. I'd say, it's a woman, isn't it? And say, oh, yes. But she got this purity of spirit, and oh God, off we go again, and then he'd be at it. No. He put women on an altar originally, and now he's having great fun knocking them off.
I never entered a relationship with a woman without having my bags packed to leave on the day I came in.
That is, you don't trust women?
No, I've never trusted women. I think they are so different to men. I think Shaw has remarked on it, and others, that it was a terrible joke on God's part that such dissimilar creatures should be expected to couple and breed.
But out of the sea, like Botticelli's Venus, has come this vision. This was Chiara Peretti, who's with him to this day.
I truly love that woman. Because when you're 70 years old, at long last you know whether you really love a woman or not. I really love her.
I never believe when somebody tells you that he loves you. I never can. It's always been like that. And and now Ken keeps repeating it from time to time. I found it astonishing also, because I'm in Italy most of the time now, and is here. But it can be true. But in a way, going to Italy back, I also realized that I helped him in stand on his own feet also, to see that he was not going to fall apart if he was alone. And at the same time, I learned from him to stand on my feet in many ways.
So your powers generally are not waning.
You mean sexual powers?
I didn't ask that.
A little short of having totally waned.
Yes. What about the others, though?
What others?
I mean, in general. I mean, your powers of concentration, your powers of motivation, are they still?
They're still there. That I wonder about. You know, I notice that my colleagues, my film colleagues, are extremely courteous to me. And I said in West Africa a few weeks ago, I said, would you opening a door for me? You didn't used to do that. I said, it's because I'm 70. Huh? So there are different, and they laugh then, because it's basically true. They think the old boy, he hasn't got much longer to go, and he's game. He's having a go. No, but what I wonder is, I mean, yes, I do it a little bit better than I've ever done it before.
Until recently, you've never articulated very loudly your passion for Wales. I suspect that's changing. Why?
Oh, yes. It's a metamorphosis. A complete metamorphosis. Or perhaps that because it was always there. Well, you see, I come from that southwest corner of Wales. I'm totally Welsh, except for this little hope that maybe I'm a bit Jewish. But I didn't speak Welsh, and I didn't have a Welsh accent. The Welsh accent I've got, I learned at Shepperton Film Studios, because Boulting's wanted me to play Welsh parts. That has nothing to do... I once challenged Richard Burton. I said, look, my father's family's name is Griffith. Stonemasons in Pembrokeshire. My mother's name is Davies. And my mother's mother sold fish in Swansea Market. I may have a touch of Welsh royalty, real Welsh royalty, in my blood. Are you as Welsh as that? So, I now recognize, and I've come home. I may be sitting here in London because still I'm trapped here by all these books and everything.
Ken, here we are, sitting in your extraordinary and aptly named house in London, a temple, if I may say so, to your enthusiasms. What will be your next enthusiasm after the Casement film?
I'm writing an encyclopedia at the moment, which I'll never finish. I haven't got the years left, on a very esoteric aspect of South Africa. Yes, and whereas once, dare I say it, I used to perhaps hasten my steps upstairs to join my lady, now I hasten my steps to the top of the house, the library, to consider the second Anglo-Boer War.
Oh, what a lovely day. Lovely, lovely day.
Mr. Meredith,
Yes, ma'am?
did Richard III kill Lord Stanley's son?
No, no, he did not. Good girl, good girl.
Well, Mr. Meredith, we won, didn't we?
Well, yes, we won. But somehow it didn't make much difference to life back home in Wales. Henry Tudor was very, very nice to his Welsh people, but I think it would be fair to say that the heir, as it were, to Owen Glendower's spirit sacrificed the aspirations, you know, the hopes of his Welsh people. Of course, we were very, very happy to have won here at Bosworth, but somehow in winning, it took the sting out of our tail. Except for Gareth and his friends, eh?
We all know that what we've done wrong, which I've murmured a bit about in this program, we carry with us to the grave. But we're the same people, and I simply know now that that is what I am. I'm very happy to be what I am because it's what my grandfather was, and I've come home.